Lost Origin brings us a bunch of new decks, and this is the one that I am without a doubt the most excited for. Hey everybody, Nick from 9Card TCG, and today we're going to be looking at a Goodra V-Star, or I guess more technically, Hisuian Goodra V-Star. And when I first saw this card, a lot of people were not super into it, but I was. And recently, I was watching Andrew Mahone play it on his stream. He played it against Palkia, and it was doing really well, and it kind of gave me the confidence to build this deck and say, you know what, I want to proxy this up, I want to get this. So thank you very much, Mr. Mahone, for that, and I have a link to his VOD in the video description, so you go check out his Twitch and all that. But this is also partially inspired by Justin Basil's list. No surprise there. I steal a lot of stuff from Justin Basil, so eventually I'm gonna get a cease and desist letter. Oh man, I love you, buddy. But anyway, link to justinbasil.com in the video description, because I don't know the exact list that Andrew played, and so I drew some inspiration from Justin Basil's list and kind of combined them, or the two portions of the decks that I know, and made this abomination. But before we get into the list, if you haven't already, do me a favor, like, subscribe, comment, check out the links for everyone that I had already mentioned, plus my Twitch, Discord, Twitter, all that kind of stuff. Share this video, tells YouTube this is a good channel, other people should watch it, and let's just go to Pokegear where we can take a look at this deck. Here we are at Pokegear, and the newest card is, of course, Hisuian Goodra V. Toppling Goo for a water and a metal. This is a dragon type, so you're going to have those dual typing energies. Toppling Goo does 60 damage. All I think about when I hear Goo is from, what was it, the Billy Madison, where the kid pees his pants, and he's like, Goo!
I had an accident.
You had an accident? What does that mean?
Goo! Anyway, your opponent switches to activate one of their benched Pokemon. Cool, it's a boss's orders for a water and a metal, does 60 damage to the active before you switch. Shell, roll out 140 during your opponent's next turn. This Pokemon takes 30 less damage. It's not ideal, but, you know, 220, it has a retreat cost of 3, no weakness and resistance, which is what makes this deck work. If this deck had a weakness, it would be terrible, but it doesn't. So the other card that we really want to be attacking with is, of course, Hisuian Goodra V-Star. Again, because it's a dragon, it's going to maintain that energy, or that mixed energy attack cost, still no weakness, and a retreat cost of 3. Iron Rollout does 200 damage for a water, metal, and some other energy. It's going to be a water, spoilers, it's going to be a water or a metal energy. It does not matter which one. During your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 80 less damage from attacks. Now, it does not say attacks from the defending Pokemon, which is really, really important wording. This says from attacks, because if it was attacks from the defending Pokemon, all your opponent had to do was switch into a new Pokemon, or go to the bench, come back to the active, and then they can start hitting you. But because this says from attacks, it does not matter what they switch into, what they evolve into, none of that matters. You're taking 80 less damage from every Pokemon, which is really, really cool. And 200 damage is pretty good damage. We could slap on a Choice Belt, be knocking on Arceus Vs and Palkia Vs, all that kind of stuff, but we're likely not going to be able to really do that before they evolve because of our 3 energy cost attack. So in this list, I opted to not have a Choice Belt in it for that exact reason, but you could go ahead and do it. We do have a V-Star Power Moisture Star. During your turn, you may heal all damage from this Pokemon. So you hit your opponent deals some damage to you. It's not going to be a lot, and you'll see why, but they're going to deal some damage to you. Before this thing gets knocked out, you just Moisture Star. Heal all that damage. Their opponent could have done 260 damage, leaving you with just 10 health. Heal it all away, hit with Iron Rollout. Now they're doing 80 less damage. So in order to knock this thing out, your opponent realistically has to be doing 350 damage, which is more than anything in the game can really do reasonably, right? There are ways that we can get that number up, like some gimmicks and whatever, but without having weakness, getting to that number is incredibly difficult. We also have some other stuff that's going to make it a little bit harder for our opponent to one-shot this Goodra. Radiant Gardevoir, all of your Pokemon take 20 less damage from your opponent's V attacks. Again, it's going to be preventing 20 damage from all Vs, which is most attacks in the game, let's be honest. Yes, Radiant Gardevoir will not protect you against the Regis and the Lunatones of the world, but you know what? You're already doing 80 less damage, and you're one-shotting all of those Pokemon, so I don't think you really have to care too much. So now, from Vs, from Palkia, you're taking or Arceus, whatever, you're taking 100 less damage with Radiant Gardevoir in play. Oh, by the way, we can use Lake Acuity here, which all Pokemon that have a water or fighting energy attached to it take 20 less damage from opponents' Pokemon attacks. Doesn't even say Pokemon V, so you could negate 100 damage from Regigigas if they have Lake Acuity and you use Iron Rollout the previous turn. They're doing 100 less damage. If it's a V, you're taking 120 less damage each turn from all Pokemon V, which is insane. We want to do even less damage to this thing. We have Fantina, which is a brand new supporter. You can only play this card if you have 10 or more cards in the Lost Zone. You can notice it has this pink, purple, bluish smoke around the border of the art card, the art itself, which is a way to let you know that this card has some Lost Zone effect. What is the Lost Zone? We'll talk about that in a minute, but you have to have 10 or more cards in the Lost Zone in order to play this. When you do play it though, during your opponent's next turn, your Pokemon take 120 less damage from the attacks of your opponent's Pokemon V, including Pokemon that came into play this turn. So anything on your board, doesn't matter if it's benched, active, whatever, every Pokemon that your opponent hits will take 120 less damage. So really, Goodra here can take 120 less from Fantina, 80 less from its Iron Roller. That's 200 less damage. Radiant Gardevoir reduces it by 20 more, that's 220, and Lake Acuity, tack on another 20. Your opponent's doing 240 less damage if you have all of that in play. That's literally, Palkia will be doing 0 damage. Arceus is doing 0 damage. Even with Arceus with 3 basic energies and a choice belt, will still do negative 10 damage. They could put a Zigzagoon ping on you and still do 0 damage, which is insanity to me. I mean, but anyway, what is the Lost Zone? The Lost Zone is a part of the field that has, well, no interaction with the cards that go to the Lost Zone don't go to the discard pile. So if you have, say, let's look at this Lost Sweeper. Again, has that pink, purple, blue border. So we have that Lost Zone border around this. You may only play this card if you put another card from your hand into the Lost Zone. So basically, instead of putting a card into play or into the discard pile, you put it into the Lost Zone, which is, it's just a second discard pile that you don't interact with. You can't get cards back from the Lost Zone. Cards from the Lost Zone don't have effects. I would say almost always. I'm sure there was one that did, but whatever. But cards do have effects if you have a certain number of cards in the Lost Zone. So, Lost Sweeper helps you put a card from your hand into the Lost Zone. Choose a tool or a stadium, and you put it into the Lost Zone. You can choose yours or your opponent's, which means if you have a Lake Acuity in play, you played one last turn, and you draw another Lake Acuity, like, man, I really need to get a card into the Lost Zone. Well, you can discard a card from your hand, well, you put one card in your hand from the Lost Zone to use Lost Sweeper, and then you can get rid of your own stadium, put that in the Lost Zone. Now that's 2 cards, and then play down your Lake Acuity, your second one, so that you still have the damage debuff the following turn. So Lost Sweeper can potentially get us 2 cards into the Lost Zone. We have Colress's Experiment, which is a new supporter that lets us look at the top 5 cards of our deck, put 3 of them in our hand, 2 into the Lost Zone. Again, you play Colress, you use Lost Sweeper, that's 2, you go ahead and use Colress, now you're already at 4, and it's potentially turn 2, or maybe even turn 1 if you're going second, so you can very easily get cards into the Lost Zone. That's already 4. Our main way of getting cards into the Lost Zone, our Lost Zone engine, if you will, is mainly Comfey with the flower picking ability. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, take the top 2 cards of your deck and look at them, put 1 into your hand and the other in the Lost Zone. Now, what's really good about this card is that it doesn't put itself to sleep or anything, which means you can manually retreat. So if we go ahead, put an energy on this thing, air balloons, whatever, we can have 2 Comfies. We use the flower picking, retreat into the other one, flower picking, now we got 2 cards in the Lost Zone, scoop up net, we can do it again, we got 3, we lost sweeper, now we could potentially have 5, call rest, now we have 7. We have 7, and it's maybe turn 1, turn 2. We can get a lot of cards in the Lost Zone. That's why we run an air balloon and 4 scoop up nets. We run 2 switches for this Comfy engine. And the really nice thing about this is that once we get enough cards into the Lost Zone where we can use Fantina, we can use another card we haven't talked about yet, we don't need to keep these Comfies in play to allow our opponent easy 1 prizes. So we can just scoop up net and then not rebench them, which is really nice. It's going to prevent against Echoing Horn, it's going to prevent against Rapid Flow, all things like that. So Comfy engine is our main Lost engine or Lost Zone engine, and it's a really good one. So we have a lot of cards here that interact with the Lost Zone, but one that's pretty important is Mirage Gate. Mirage Gate, you can only play this if you have 7 or more cards in the Lost Zone. Search your deck for 2 basic energies of different types and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. So we can go ahead and turn 1, attach an energy to Goodra V. And then we can discard 1 with, Quick Ball, Ultra Ball, whatever, to get a Comfy in play or a Gardevoir play, whatever. Do our Lost Zone shenanigans, Melanie onto that Goodra. Once we have 7, we can go ahead and Mirage Gate to the 1 Goodra that we've been attaching to, and then whatever's in the active to retreat, and then there you go. Now we have all 3 energies, really, onto our Goodras, set up, ready to go, and we can start hitting with Iron Rollout very, very fast. It seems like it would be a slow deck, and sometimes it will be if you don't draw well, or you choose the wrong cards to go into the Lost Zone. Maybe, you have to just, sometimes you make difficult choices with these. It's the nature of this kind of deck. But if you can get it going, you get it going. Now, one of the really nice things about this is that we do have a lot of Pokemon search between 4 Quick Balls, 3 Ultra Balls. We have a bunch of Scoop Up Nets, so we can reuse that Comfy to kind of draw through our deck as well. Melanie lets us draw a few cards. Colress lets us see a bunch of cards off the top of our deck. So, really nice. Another thing that's cool about this Mirage Gate, and you're like, why do we have 4 of these? Well, part of the reason is because of things like Hyper Potion. We want to be able to use Hyper Potion to heal off our Goodra. This maybe we can't afford the Fantina this turn. Maybe it's a little too early in the game. Maybe we already Fantina'd, or we had to play Boss's Orders on Melanie or something like that, which is a combo that we can do. We can Mirage Gate onto a Goodra, Melanie, and then discard 2 energies. Or do the other way around. We can Hyper Potion, Mirage Gate, Melanie, whatever, and kind of continue our assault with Goodra. So a lot of really interesting things we could do with this deck. I'm super, super excited for it. One of the really nice things about it too is that you do not need a large bench. We can play down as many Comfies as we need so that we can get our Lost Zone going and then just scoop them up and not rebench them and keep a single Goodra or maybe 2 Goodras, whatever we need, in play so that we can kind of just attack, tank, heal, attack, tank, heal. And that's the cycle of this deck. Is very hard to KO these things, especially when we add on a Big Charm. Now we have 300 health, and we're doing, your opponent's taking, doing 240 less damage potentially, which means they have to do 300 plus 240. They have to do 540 damage in 1 turn in order to one-shot this thing. That's, who's doing that? It's literally impossible. And then between things like Hyper Potions and our Moisture Star to kind of heal us, how are you knocking this thing out? And like I said before, 200 damage is really respectable. That is not nothing. You are 2-shotting everything in the game. So is it as good of a heal as Cheren's Care? No, probably not. And in fact, you're not really healing much. The Hyper Potion and the Moisture Star. Maybe you pull off 1 Hyper Potion. You can only use Moisture Star once. So that's, interesting. Most of the time we're reducing damage. We're doing debuff. So we're still going to take damage. But that's going to be the challenge of this deck, is knowing when to Hyper Potion, knowing when to Moisture Star. Do you sacrifice that first Goodra and force our opponent to go through a second one and make it even tankier and harder because you're going to heal that second one? Lost Sweeper is really nice, and you might even consider a second one if you know you're going to be going against a lot of Path of the Peak decks, because Moisture Star is an ability, and we want to be able to draw through our deck really quickly to either find our Stadium or find a Lost Sweeper and get that Stadium out of there so we can Moisture Star the turn we need to. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole deck. By the way, a couple of Boss's Orders. You know, sometimes you just want to boss up a single prizer, knock it out. Maybe you knock out something that's you know, Starmie, 190 health, Illuminion, a Crobat, kind of take those last two prizes and just speed up the game, or get two prizes, maybe you need some cards in hand for the following turn. Now you can do that, you just boss up something, Iron Rollout, take a KO, and now you're taking 80 less damage in the process. So, you know, there's a lot of really cool things we could do with this deck. I'm ultra pumped for this, and it doesn't need a ton. You need a 3/3 line of Goodra, which I don't anticipate being that expensive, and the Radiant Gardevoir will probably be one of the more expensive cards in this deck, but you only need one, and the rest of this is relatively commons, uncommons. Maybe the Fantina and the Chorus would be rares, but you know, I don't think it'll be too expensive to build this, and most of this stuff is going to stick around post rotation. Minus, like, I'm sure we'll get a replacement for Quick Ball. We might not get a replacement for Scoop Up Net or like Rod, but we could. Rod's like the one card in this deck that I'm not sure we need. It's really nice to get back a Gardevoir. It's really nice to get back a Goodra if we prized one. Something like that. It's really nice to put a couple energies back into the deck so we can Mirage Gate later game, but especially if we're like putting a lot of energies into the Lost Zone, which is kind of why we have so many. We don't need a ton of energies. We need 6. We're probably not going to go through more than 2 Goodras a game. So 6 energies, maybe 7 if we attach one to a Comfey there. We have 13. So we have a lot of energies we could just kind of dump into the Lost Zone or dump into the discard pile for, you know, whatever search, and then Melanie onto it. A lot of things we can do here, but yeah, that's pretty much the deck. I hope you enjoyed, found this a little informative. If you did, you know, let me know by liking this video and subscribing. Let me know what you think of this Goodra deck. Are you worried about it? Are you hyped for it? What changes you would make? I absolutely want to hear from you. And that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much, and I will see you next time.